On a recent M Cave hike, a strange finding was caught on camera, and it could possibly link back to when Kenny Veach was out there, implying that he wasn't alone on his final hike, that someone may have been waiting for him. Hi there, welcome to the Kenny Veach M Cave case. Today we're taking a look back at SB Vega's adventures M Cave hike, which was done a few weeks ago or so when he was looking for the second mineshaft. If you are interested in that video analysis and the true location of it, which could link to where Kenny Veach ended up at and his phone, and not the one what we saw in the video, you'll be able to find the full playlist and those videos attached, top right corner where the eye symbol is. But today we're focusing in on another strange finding caught on camera on that same very hike, when he decided to take a right up a different canyon, and when going so far up, he noticed something strange that stood out, and upon closer inspection, there was another item found. So I'm going to be doing an analysis of that today, breaking it down, giving my thoughts, how it could apply to Kenny Veach, links on top of it based on what Kenny caught on camera too on his October hike of 2014, and just a general theme of, in such a desolate, remote place, there are people out there at times, but what are they really doing? Whether that be back then with Kenny or in present time, what's really going on out there? It feels like there's a level of secrecy, rogue hikers, mysterious people or beings. It's very weird what's happening, especially when it's so desolate. So welcome. If you're currently here during this live premiere, you can share your live reactions in the chat box on the right side of the screen at any point. And for those watching on catch up, if you have any questions or thoughts, answers, whether you agree or not with this mystery, drop a comment down below under the video and I'll respond back later. It does help with spreading awareness of the case, the videos, new discussions and ideas. Who knows where it can branch off to next. On top of today, I'll be doing a bit of a map analysis so you get a rough idea of the location of where SB was at and the possible links to other areas of interest. With that all being said, I'm going to play to you first the clip of SB from his point of view upon finding this object, and make sure to look closely when it plays.
Kind of clear rocky area, looks like a rock pile. That's the agave burn pit we had lunch last time. There are some artifacts there, so I think we'll explore the canyon here. We'll just be careful. Rough terrain on these rocks here. It's a very quiet day out here in Jomay Canyon. This is the high point. Do you see what I see? A stack of rocks. What happened last video? So far I'm not seeing anything. Oh shit! Big ass scorpion. Big ass scorpion. My God, that's a big son of a bitch. That's not like the usual scorpion. That bastard was big. Big ass scorpion. Look at that bad boy. Big boy. This here is clearly man-made. Try to see if I could see anything in there hidden. I'll move this big rock. I don't see anything obvious in there. It's more than likely a marker where somebody tried to build a rock cairn. I don't see anything obvious buried inside there. Here's a shell casing, a very large one, an old one. I think it says 30-06. What do you think? 30-06? Can't tell. Anyway, old shell casing. Clearly somebody was shooting and or hunting out here at one point in time, because it takes brass a long time to turn black like that. I would say 98% man-made. So people have been out here. Why? Why'd they come out here? What's out here? Anything?
So that was quite an interesting find by SB when going up that canyon. Although it's slightly away from where Kenny Veach was hiking, you never know if he took an alternative route at some point, whether that be his final hike when going missing, or a couple of hikes before when coming across the M Cave, and even before that, did Kenny stack any of the rocks to create these rock cairns, or was someone there before Kenny and even afterwards? whilst SB was going up this particular canyon. As you can see, there's numerous loose rocks and small stones all gathered about, and some particular ones have been gathered and stacked. So it is very likely that a human was responsible, whether that be a marker, a beacon point. Now, visually, they do look somewhat similar to what I've seen in the past, which may have been captured elsewhere, either by Scott Natal or more so J-Chuck Vlogs. I believe when they've been out hiking in other areas, they came across similar stacked rocks. So I don't know if that means it was all done by the same people or person out there at some point in the past, but if they are markers or beacon points, I wonder why here in particular, because later in SB's footage, when he continues up that canyon, it does eventually lead to a dead end. So it's not really going anywhere, and there didn't appear to be any caves or extra things of interest over that way. So why would you pick an area to mark it off, unless for each canyon there is a beacon point or there's a hidden meaning behind it all? And whilst SB had been out there previously, hence why he came across this other rock cairn stack of rocks, I would say, in my opinion, this is more man-made by humans compared to this one, where it appears a lot flatter on ground. However, when removing those rocks and stones, there was a bit of a shocking surprise there. Some people had argued and said, but what's beyond? Could the same apply to this one? Maybe. Nevertheless, it's just interesting the way it's been stacked, somewhat carefully done to balance the rocks on top, including the odd heavier, bigger rock on top, while some loose, smaller ones are by the side. Now, could any of this style have been applied, but on a more professional level, with a supposed M cave, if it was being covered or filled in? Granted, if that was the case, would military or government do it in such a natural looking way? Or would they do it more on a professional basis by sealing it up so it's not movable, the rocks? Whilst this is just a rock cairn and it's done by a human, okay? There's still a level of skill behind it in balancing the rocks and shaping it in such a way. Some can be more complex than others. But when it comes to a cave and you've got to fill such a big opening and in a certain way, are you going to be doing it more naturally, so you're less likely to question it? Or are you going to do it more professionally, but it becomes a bit more obvious why it's covered up? But at the cost of it being more noticeable, it's done to ensure that no one gets in. So just by looking at a couple of rocks on a smaller scale, you can apply it to a bigger situation, like with Kenny Veach. Now, beside this one, in terms of the canyon which heads over that way, which would be considered more so east, when SB went further on, it did eventually reach a dead end. So would Kenny Veach go all the way up there at any point? Maybe not, but he could have hovered around the area at some point when searching. Now, at any point, if you notice anything else of interest or strange, whether that be in the background, if it be the tree, any of the rocks on the ground, if you notice any bones, fragments, it could be really anything that stands out, you can leave a timestamp down below with a comment under the video, because you never know what can be found and caught on camera. Whilst SB will see so much, when viewing it back, you may pick up on more, whether that be symbols, patterns on rock, which look unnatural. Because you take it in mind, if you're looking at an area where it's been like man-made by people, or something has been created, a wall, a stack, a beacon, what other items could have been modified or altered with in the process? You never know. So, when looking at it up close, nice clear visual, anything tucked away or hidden in the vegetation back there appears to be like a heavier rock hidden. I don't see much personally. Is that like a pine nut or a pine cone or something? Maybe. I don't see any like pine related bushes where you could collect them from this angle at least. But of course, beside this rock cairn, you would have noticed another very, if not more important finding, that bullet casing, and we'll get to that very shortly. I just want to check myself to make sure I don't miss anything. Now, there are slight patterns on the rock, yes, you can say, but very likely natural. It's not like an M symbol like Robbins Canyon, but it's always worth taking a look because you never know. And then upon top down, looking down at it through the gaps when moving that big boulder rock out the way, there doesn't appear to be too much, or at least you can't see too much from this angle perspective, but SB believed there was no need in going any further. Now, some people have argued and said, could it be, besides a beacon marker, some kind of grave for someone, person from the past, a hiker, and to honour the hiker, they decided to bury the person or scatter ashes out there and then pile some rocks on top and salute and honour that individual. Whilst that is a possibility, considering the area is so desolate and empty and we only know of Kenny Veach to really go out there, who else would be? Or are people going to say, this is the spot where Kenny Veach died? Or this is where Kenny Veach was taken by other people and buried underneath the stack of rocks, if not deeper in the ground? But considering that there are a range of them out there, for example, this one, and many others out there spread about, you could find one, nothing's there. You could find another, nothing is there. You can keep on digging around these parts and you might not find anything. Unfortunate situation could be maybe 1 out of 100, if not more, may eventually have Kenny's body underneath if there was some kind of foul play, cover-up, darkness. And some people could say it looks a bit obvious that something is hidden here, or more so underground, and then rocks are stacked on top. And SB, like Gary said, it would become a wild goose chase looking for every single one. But sometimes maybe if this was the case and anyone was responsible for burying Kenny Veach's body, this would be an ideal spot, or somewhere where it might seem a little bit obvious, but then at the same time you just wouldn't consider bothering to search it, especially when you move the rocks and think, well, there's nothing there. You wouldn't think much more of it. And as well, you might be thinking, well, it's just like any other rock marker out there. There's no need to move or adjust it. Keep it be, allow it how it is. And anyone responsible for burying a body may do that on purpose because it's more likely to be avoided, because people don't think much will come from it, especially if there's more out there. The more of these that exist, the less likely they're going to be thoroughly searched. But if you've got one anomaly, as in one existing and no others are around, then you're more likely to check that one out and investigate further. If there's more or many, those responsible in the background could be more likely to put a body somewhere like here. That's just a suggestion. But when taking the peek and looking around, it doesn't seem to be on the surface level. Upon reflection of that other area, which SB previously came across when moving all the rocks, some silt, dirt, probably gathered from the wash, flooding with time, flow of water, rain, saturated the ground. Not much to see, but some suggested, what about buried underneath it? If you started digging into the ground, what would you find? Was it a cache? Was it hidden treasure? Could a body be found here? Because of the radius being quite small, then now I think maybe the body would have to be more vertical into a hole and not so much horizontal. I could be wrong. Some vegetation can grow after. I think it was like a grave or so from a fellow viewer said that when they were out in the desert, maybe Arizona, and they came across a potential grave, but there was cactus or vegetation growing about, but that came after, so it kind of concealed it. So if you've buried someone in the ground, you've got a stack of rocks as well, and it's near to vegetation or new vegetation which will grow with time, it will add to the concealment and it feels like more naturalness, the elements. So it kind of camouflages it in a way amongst and on top of rocks too. But as said, you come across something like this, and this one in particular, you'll be digging endlessly and constantly. It feels like you need more of a clue, more of an indication or marker to suggest digging deeper, literally, because yeah, anything interesting you find out there, you want to explore and investigate, but you got to be careful of time, energy, your own health, the time, and just everything in general. And the more things that are found out there, the more that needs to be searched, but then it gets a little bit too much. So it's about trying to be practical and efficient, narrowing it down to pinpoint why Kenny would be here, what gives that reason for that. Is there any indication or clue? Is it near to the scent of where Kenny ended at, such as one of the mine shafts? And you could put that argument across. We'll get to that in the map analysis later. But I think one point you could make is what Steve found besides, well, kind of tucked away near or under some of those rocks, the stack, which makes it interesting. Maybe it fell out, maybe it ejected, maybe it was dropped on the ground by someone, but the fact that there is a bullet casing and it's already been fired, I don't know where the bullet ended up, but a casing near to the stack of rocks. Some people have said, is it a memorial? Is it a memento to honour a fellow hunter or hiker? And it was put there out of respect, but because it's kind of concealed and hidden, it's either more or less likely maybe it was ejected or fell out when the gun was fired, discharged, the casing fell out or hit the ground, or it was purposely put there and kind of tucked away. And if you can't see it, it's where his hand is. He's grabbing it there. So it stood out to Steve, despite it being non-shiny, I believe. Well, it might have been a little bit shiny in some areas, but it was a bit more dull and black with time. And because of it being under these rocks, it's kind of concealed. On a smaller scale, it's concealed kind of like how the bamboo sword was at that little campsite further north over Wild Horse Pass in the selection of the Gully of Rocks, that small little area, you remember? That bamboo sword was kind of hidden under a rock, a bit more open though. This particular little thing is way down there, but Steve was able to see it at the time, which is good. So you let me know, do you think it was intentionally placed there for a good reason or a bad reason? Or do you think it naturally fell out or was ejected when a gun was fired? Depending. I'm no gun expert. I'm just suggesting, that is all. If you see anything else within these gaps, cracks, let me know. Can't see any soil disturbance. And if it did link to Kenny, over 10 years, I believe, has passed by. So things would have settled slightly. Weathering as well. Harder to check for those disturbances with the ground in a way. Upon closer inspection, the casing, is that the charge, whatever you call it, when it's fired, it hits the back, causes the reaction within, and the bullet comes out the end of the case through the barrel. And then, and rotating it around, looking at that. And the reason why this is really important, when you look over that way, it might not be the best angle, but over that way is Little Jermay Canyon, and that's looking, I believe, west or so. And I think Jermay Guzzler may be over that way. It's kind of hard to show just from this angle, but somewhere over that way is, I believe, Little Jermay Canyon, and where that other mine shaft was found on SB's hike on lower ground that way. And then off screen to the right, around that bend of mountain, that would be continuing on north. So this is currently facing west when it comes to Little Jermay Canyon. And then the mountains over there, what you see on the other side of them, that's where Robin's hike was, the rock anomaly in terms of the M symbol, the one what SB hiked in a very recent time and where Jeff Clark did too. The reason why this is so important is the theory of whose bullet does this belong to? A hunter, Kenny Veach, or a potential, murderer, hitman, some kind of person assigned to taking out Kenny Veach? It's important to acknowledge that when it came to Kenny Veach, October 2014, on his recorded hike, he took his handgun for personal protection. It makes sense. Not everybody feels the need to. Some feel it's too cumbersome, it's uncomfortable, it rubs on the side like how Jeff said. Everybody has their preferences. When Kenny was out there originally, he wasn't armed. But when coming across that supposed M cave and feeling those vibrations he wasn't familiar with, it scared him. And what's within the cave? You never know. Whether it be a human, whether it be a dangerous wild animal, a mountain lion, you got to protect yourself depending where you go. And going into a cave, especially in a desolate area where there's no help or anyone nearby, is quite a risky thing. So by taking a firearm, you can use it to fire as a warning shot or to shoot at whatever that may approach and attack you. But it was described that Kenny Veach had a 9mm handgun, 9mm bullets used and chambered. So when the girlfriend later said, well, the gun wasn't to be found in his house, so likely he took it with him on his hike, which is very likely. But then that was being pushed as a narrative that Kenny Veach used his firearm on himself and that he would never be found. Well, pairing it all together, if that was Kenny Veach's bullet, which it's not, because the shell casing is too big. I'm no expert, I'm going to be honest with you, but that does not look like a 9mm. It looks too big. Looks like it comes from some kind of hunting rifle or smaller hunting rifle. But in a different scenario, if that was Kenny Veach's bullet, which belonged to his gun, and he fired it off, and the casing somehow ejected out. How exactly? And if the bullet was to be found in this spot here, tucked away under those rocks, then you'd expect that Kenny's body would have been found right here, don't you think? In this area. Just flat out. And as for the stack of rocks, would that have been created by Kenny? It wouldn't make sense to be an open sight and a marker too. He didn't want to be found. So to end his life in plain sight wouldn't make sense whatsoever. So I don't think, even if it appeared to look more similar to Kenny's bullet that may have been used, I just don't think he would have done it to himself in this spot. It's too open. He wouldn't have been able to conceal himself, and he wouldn't have been buried in the ground either, because he would have already been dead by then. But on the basis that somebody else took care of Kenny, more likely to be concealed in that sense, and for a bullet to remain nearby. So just once again, to show you, you look at the bullet casing there, it is blackened with time. It's taken quite some years to get to that stage. And what we will do to apply it possibly to Kenny Veach is just take a background look as to how long it can take for bullet casing shells to, change in colour with time. But that size bullet case and the bullet its own right, likely, very likely. And I know people will say this is so obvious, but I said I'm no expert with firearms. But based on the size and the proportion, that would not fit in that handgun, that pistol, whatever you want to call it. But it still appears that Kenny did take his handgun with him on his hike. But where did it end up? We've not found it. Have we found any specific 9mm bullets? I don't think so. Have any other bullets or more so casings been found out there? Possibly. Maybe not as much as finding animal bones, from what I can remember. It depends what people are looking for. Most are looking for the M cave or Kenny Veach or signs of Kenny. And something like this would be quite relevant or important in general, the theme of any bullets or casings. Because if Kenny Veach had his firearm, which he supposedly did, whether he used it or not on himself or on someone, it could be a clue along the way. And in this case, it doesn't appear to be a clue directly to Kenny. However, could it have been used by somebody else on Kenny Veach? Because whilst SB said it could have been a hunter, but why would they be out here in particular up a dead-end canyon? Because when you look at it from this angle, it does go up to a dead end. Maybe going up that way to look for, mountain lions, little bighorn sheep, any other type of wildlife you'd be allowed to hunt or would be practical in hunting. Would a hunter out here be doing it for survival, for food, or trophy hunting, a hobby? Is it a professional hunter, an amateur hunter? Because to even get to this spot, you got to cover nearly 3 to 4 hours hiking just to get to, it might be a bit less than that, okay? Because I base 3 to 4 hours to get to the mine shaft just before Wild Horse Pass. but it could be 3 to 4 hours if you used to go up to the second mine shaft and then take a right up this canyon to get so far up. It could be 3 to 4, 2 to 3 hours. Still, that takes quite some time and energy. The gradient of the hike, the quality of the terrain, just to come here to hunt. It sounds like quite a big stretch. You know, you must have a real good reason to be going out here, considering how desolate, hard and tiring it can be. Now, as for the aging of it, the environment still would have been difficult. Present, past, it doesn't matter. The environment, the terrain, the temperatures still would have been difficult regardless of when a person was to go out there and possibly hunt. It just depends how passionate someone is. But if someone was on a mission, just like really Robin, when going up such a dangerous canyon, that someone else could be willing to cover such distance on foot if it meant doing something that they needed to do or wanted to do or was assigned. Could that apply to eliminating Kenny Veach? That on the day, if it was true, November 10th, as Kenny is hiking over that way in the distance, going across from left to right, heading north towards the mine shaft at least, because that's where his scent ended up at, where it be the mine shaft somewhere down there, the second one, which SB found in recent time, or beyond the one what we're familiar with, as in what Kenny Veach started his video. And when going across from left to right, someone was stood in this spot, round here, laying prone, crouched, with a rifle, locked and loaded, aiming down the sights, waiting for Kenny to pass by. Some contract individual, mercenary, military related, a fatal shot, or would it be a wounding, incapacitating shot to take him out, to render him incapacitated, and then take him away? And why would people go to such great lengths? Because if there is such a secret out there, and it's military related, a cave, vibrations, military equipment, a super secret out there, which Kenny was willing to go to and record, on top of that, his final hike more so. Because first time recorded wasn't successful, and he was willing to try again, and maybe the military thought, right, we've got to put an end to this, because if Kenny keeps going out there, he might eventually find it. And he seems very determined and passionate, so he isn't going to go away easily. We have to make him go away. So based on that possibility, that if this casing belonged to someone that was trying to eliminate or incapacitate Kenny Veach from this distance, range and angle, is that possible? As for the condition of the casing itself, does it date back? Is it relevant to the time of Kenny Veach's disappearance from? I just did a quick Google search in regard to how many years does it take for a brass bullet casing to blacken, and it gives a bit of a rough explanation. The time it takes for a brass bullet casing to blacken due to natural processes, tarnishing, oxidization, can vary significantly, ranging from a few months to several years, depending on environmental conditions and storage. So if it's not stored correctly and the environmental factors are heightened, it's going to accelerate this tarnishing of the casing. And with it being left out in the open of the Mojave Desert, you can expect for it to occur more quicker. So it says a few months to several years. I don't know if it depends on the brand or the year of that type of bullet casing and the quality of it with time, the brand of it too. But nevertheless, if it says a few months to several years, well, Kenny Veach has been missing for at least, 11 years? Of course, you got to date it back to at the time of when the bullet was fired, the casing was discharged. Likely it would have been more fresh at the time, and if it involved Kenny Veach, then yeah, it could link. And then ever since then onwards, whilst Kenny has gone wherever, been taken somewhere or buried underground, for example, that casing has remained on the ground, somewhat open and exposed to the light, to the elements, the environment, the temperature changes with time, that naturally is going to tarnish, and it could be sped up at certain rates. For example, the key factors: humidity, moisture. High humidity and exposure to moisture are the primary drivers of tarnishing and oxidization. In damp environments, brass can start to darken within months. And based on what SB said in his previous video about that rock area, when moving it, the ground was quite damp and moist, how it can hold the water, and the rocks covering it too, and keeping it somewhat shaded as well. It can keep it wet for longer. And with the other rock cairn, the more significant one in how it visually looks, that bullet casing was somewhat on ground level, slightly tucked under the rocks where it's a bit shaded, where it could stay a bit wet longer, and up higher elevation, if there was a bit of a wash or water can run down, it could have collected in that area, collected around those rocks and kind of seeped in the ground, become a bit saturated with time and speeding up that process. And just in general, high humidity, which we saw with the weather report at the time when Kenny Veach went missing onwards, there was quite some high humidity, and then through the years as well. So you pair one thing, moisture, with humidity, and the levels out there, it's bound to speed up the process, which could mean that that casing to turn black can fit in the time frame of when Kenny Veach went missing and hasn't been found since. And how one thing's weathered with time, and Kenny, well, he remains a mystery. Environmental pollutants, airborne pollutants, particularly sulfur compounds, present in urban or coastal areas. Well, don't think that applies here. Handling, oils and salts from human skin can initiate tarnishing and leave uneven marks. Well, I don't think it would have been picked up or handled in between them. I think, in my opinion, if the firearm was fired and the casing was discharged in some way, well then, I don't think it would have been touched after that point. Protective coatings, lacquered or coated brass, will resist tarnishing for much longer, in years, because the metal is shielded from the air and moisture. Unlacquered or raw brass darkens much more quickly. So I guess that depends. Now, when I did try looking at another article or a search term as for when things could become rusted, and it said it can't because of the type of material, but it can tarnish with time, it could take maybe 7 years, 10 years. And to be honest, that still ties in line with Kenny Veach's disappearance, because Kenny's been missing for about 10, 11 years onwards. So I think it can link still. Another factor is chemical exposure. Contact with harsh chemicals, acids, such as powder, decomposition in old ammunition, or even some household cleaners can cause rapid discoloration. Can you get chemicals or acids or some kind of stuff being emitted out of rocks or in the desert area, depending on the type of material? Now, if that was the case and you got a bullet casing near to that type of stuff, that could cause some kind of discoloration. I'm no expert there, but it's just a suggestion. Storage conditions, proper storage in a cool, dry, dark place. Sometimes it can preserve the brass in a shiny state for decades. Decades, 10 plus years. The thing is, fam, cool, dry, I don't think that applies within the one that SB found, with it being out in the open and the humidity too. In some cases, blackening can occur immediately after firing, which is typically due to insufficient pressure, failing to seal the chamber, allowing gases to escape backwards and deposit soot in the case. This is a different phenomenon than long-term environmental tarnishing. Ultimately, blackening is a natural part of the aging process for unsealed brass, and it doesn't necessarily indicate a problem with the casing itself. So there are some possibilities that the firearm may have been discharged, the casing fell to the ground around the time of when Kenny Veach was out and about there, where it directly ties in line with when Kenny was out hiking the final time and somebody else was already there waiting. That's another, theory possibility. Putting that aside for now, what we need to focus on before heading over to a map analysis is another rock cairn which was noticed by Kenny Veach, of all people, in October of 2014 when he set out to try and prove his finding at the M Cave after being encouraged to go out there. When approaching Pitcher Canyon, besides the creepy paranormal voices and whispers, when he was going down that way where it got more narrow upon near to the descent and drop, there was a rock cairn noticed by Kenny on the left upper side of the rocks. And it's how he described it, which was rather interesting, but also a little creepy.
And I have not seen the funny looking little cave. But I did see a rock cairn, so somebody has been down here. Another adventurer like myself.
The reason why it's so creepy and how he refers to whoever as a fellow adventurer just like himself. Well, Kenny was going out there once again in search of the M Cave and also on his supposed final hike. Who else would be going out there and why? Because ever since, only a handful of hikers have set out there, and they were on a goal and a mission to locate one of two things, either Kenny and or the M Cave, as well as documenting other mysteries along the way and tying up some loose ends. There's a reason, there's a motive behind it. You date it back to when Kenny Veach was still around and alive, before he disappeared, before he put the place on the map and made it somewhat popular. Not as many people would know about the area. What's the attraction to that spot? Because it's desolate, it's remote, it can be a bit bleak, dangerous, far away, issues with cell phone service, signals and things like that, brutal, rough terrain, dangerous wildlife, temperature changes, humidity, the lot. So beside Kenny Veach, who else would be going out there at that time and for what reason exactly? Now granted, Kenny had been out there a few times beforehand, or at least once before coming across the M Cave, and he was just out there hiking. So yeah, it's still possible other hikers could have been searching about and just exploring. But considering it's been put on the map ever since and only a handful of people have been out there, before it became a mystery, you'd think really no one would be in that location just based off that reasoning ability. And yet there is a rock cairn, a stack of rocks made by someone. And that was there before Kenny got there in October. So when does it really date back to? Does that rock cairn link with other rocks and formations about? Were they all done at the same time by the same person or people? Could it be really old and ancient? It would be to do with Indians or other people in the past. Then it wouldn't likely as linked to Kenny Veach as like a marker, a beacon, a symbol which he was trying to get the attention of the general public to go in a certain direction. If they were already built before Kenny got there, it's not going to link the same way. However, that bullet casing, that's more mysterious, right? It's a bit more modern in a way. So we're taking that into consideration, that there was the presence of someone or some people before Kenny went back out there. Is it possible at the final time when Kenny Veach hiked out there, he wasn't alone and people or an individual was physically present and waiting? It does make you think. Transitioning onto Google Earth imagery, you'll be familiar with some of these markers because it is to do with the same hike in regard to that mine shaft. What I want to do right now is show you the point of view of some of the earlier footage, what we saw in today's video by Steve when he was pointing to that canyon and how he walked up it. So if we zoom in just here, roughly in the area where Steve's vehicle was parked, and as well for Kenny Veach at the time, years back, where it would have been part 2, Jermay Road. The canyon, Little Jermay Canyon. And roughly in this area, facing that angle which is north, SB mentioned about an agave burn pit just a bit further up, and then kind of on the right, east, is the canyon he was going up, and then he would come back down to get to the second mine shaft. Now, when I did the mine shaft map analysis and the footage there, I didn't show it all because I wanted to focus specifically on the mine shaft, and I did say about an upcoming video to do with the other canyon, and that's what we're focusing in on now. But that burn pit which SB referred to just up ahead, it's the one here we see where it's like white and circular. So before he investigated that area and the mine shaft, he took a right turn, highlighted in that yellow pathway. And it is a very rough marker, so just take that into consideration. When going so far up that way, he came across the rock cairn and the bullet casing. So you can see the canyon. somewhat wide at first, and it looked wide when he turned back looking the way he came. But then the higher and further you go, it gets a bit more narrow. So it's not the exact spot, so just take that into consideration. But based on the vegetation up that way and that one tree which stood out, it was quite lush, green, colourful. I'm just thinking there was a bit of a clearing as well. That appears to look like a tree. Could be wrong. And nearby, if there's any rocks and where the cairn was. So it's my interpretation, but it is somewhere up this way. I don't want to be too specific because I don't ultimately know, but I know for certain that this is the correct canyon, and SB would confirm that himself. Now, if SB or somebody else wants to give the precise coordinates, you're welcome to do so down below in the comment section. But this is just a general guide so you know where, locations and places of interest are at and how far or near they are from Kenny's hike route, because the closer they are, the more likely they can link and apply. So, when SB got to around this point and was walking around the rock and looking and investigating the bullet casing, it's been fired already. Where's the actual bullet? Who knows? And what direction was the shot fired in? That's unknown of. However, when facing that way, which SB did when he, I believe, was looking at the bullet or so over that way, you could see how just ahead is that second mineshaft. As I was telling you, on ground level from a distance, you can't see it. The same with satellite imagery, but that marker where the second mineshaft is accurate. So it's basically just ahead or adjacent, depending which way you're hiking. And for Kenny Veach, going from left to right, from across, the screen, what you're looking at, Kenny, if we're putting it in the shoes of Kenny Veach, based on the theory, if he did get shot or incapacitated, what would have happened is Kenny parked down here, down Joe May Road, got out, and then decided to do his hike. Whether he made it to the original mineshaft, which you see in his hike footage, his earlier hike, or if he only went to the second mineshaft. The second mineshaft classified as it was found after and recently investigated by SB. That's why I call it that. So we've got Kenny Veach's mineshaft, and then we've got, let's call it SB Vegas mineshaft, because he investigated it. Did Kenny go to the SB mineshaft, or did Kenny go to his mineshaft to drop his phone and coins off? And the other question is, due to the conditions and the circumstances unknown, did Kenny even put them there by himself, by his own will? Or did someone else do it as a plant, a diversion, tactic, misdirection? Or just done say, yes, Kenny is out here, but by the way, we've taken care of him. We've taken him elsewhere. Now that links in with what Jeff Clark has been suggesting, but that's more either military or aliens, abduction, kidnapping, being taken away by air. That could still apply within this situation, where my theory is a bit more darker in a way. So just picture it, Kenny Veach is hiking north up this way, somewhat early in the day, so it's going to be light. However, it's likely going to be quiet. And then upon going so far up, either at the mineshaft that you see here in this area, if it was any further, well, it wouldn't link to my theory. So it would have to be that Kenny Veach got to this point here. Rough coordinates, there you go, on screen. Whether he hiked in the middle or the left lane of the canyon, or further to the right, which SB did in order to get to that mineshaft and the canyon, depends on the range as well. Almost like near to Joe May Guzzler, if Kenny Veach was round this area, preferably if he went to the mineshaft, as it would make sense because his scent ended at that spot. And because it's on a bit of a hill, a bit of a mound, you would be exposed to anyone up that way looking down, which would be them looking west and Kenny possibly facing north. Right? Because like, if you got a car coming down that way and a car coming across, there can be a collision. But at distance, when it comes to a sniper nest, some kind of ambush, as Kenny's going across the screen from right to left, and someone's over there near that rock cairn, locked and loaded, whether they're hiding behind that rock cairn, resting their rifle on the rock cairn as like a makeshift tripod, or just making use of the environment, looking down that scope, breathing slowly, waiting, maybe if there's got something in the earpiece to fire the shot. Does any of that sound drastic or extreme? You could argue it. But if there is truly something mysterious out there, and Kenny Veach once experienced it, and that Kenny publicly talked about it online and it garnered a big interest, that can be a threat to the military. Because if Kenny is the key to a secret and he's going to unlock it and unleash the floodgates to the general public, that can put the military in a tough situation. And sometimes, when you know too much, it can make you a target, and you do need to be dealt with by force or other forms of negotiation. Because Kenny went out more than once, and on his failed hike, he was willing to go out yet again. Maybe the military thought, right, Kenny's just going to keep coming back, so we need to put an end to this once and for all. Whether that be a fatal shot, or if it be a wounding shot, if Kenny is walking up this way, maybe he makes it to that mine shaft. Doesn't mean to say he puts his phone down and coins and then is shot. Or some people, others could suggest that Kenny Veach put his phone and coins down when approached by someone, maybe coming from that way or nearby. And that was done just to say, help me, something bad's happened to me. He didn't have time to leave a proper message, but he had to leave something behind to say that he was out there under, strange circumstances for his outcome. But then the alternative, which links to what we're getting at today, is Kenny Veach may have just been simply hiking, intentionally trying to locate the cave one last time, whether some claim he's suicidal or not. And along the way, he comes across this mine shaft, whether he's familiar with it or not. I believe it's where that black hole is in the middle of the screen. Maybe he was looking down it, investigating it. Oh, did he fall in? Was he pushed in? Maybe not. SB did look inside, and it wasn't deep enough, but deep enough to fall in. However, there was no bones, no remains, and it seemed like it hit like a base level that they only dug so far in as for mining in the past. But you could still be just looking about. And if you're looking about and staying somewhat still, it does make you an easier target if there was someone nearby ready to take the shot to silence Kenny, to incapacitate him. Sam, when you're over there, they've got a clear view for most part of it, not much obstruction. Correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems to be a clear view. You slightly got the higher ground advantage. Take in mind the bullet drop too. Not too much distance from one spot to the other. And it doesn't directly have to be at the mine shaft. It could be a bit more to the left or a bit more to the right, and Kenny's just walking by and someone's ready to fire the shot. So it's just a possibility. And if Kenny Veach was killed or incapacitated, the individual or anyone else could have gone on down to Kenny and moved him on and made sure that there wasn't any evidence or DNA left behind besides the scent, because there was no reports of blood being found. But in terms of the coins and the phone, the condition remains unknown. I suppose it said that the phone was on charge, or that there was a charge on the phone, depending how you interpret that. But, whilst Kenny says he doesn't want to be found if he was to go out there and not come back, other people may not want Kenny to be found either, and they would do a good job too. So it doesn't just all come down to what Kenny wants, it can also come down to what external people, government, military may want, border control, etc. If there is something of interest in the area and about, they want to keep it protected, safe from the general public knowledge. They don't want the general public to find or see it. And for most part of it, no one would be coming here, so there'd be no worry. But then Kenny shows up, blurts it about online, makes himself a possible target. You never know. Now, if it's just down to hunting, as I said, the distance that you have to cover and the time it takes, is it really worth going out of your way to just come here to do that when you could probably go to other areas which are more accessible and have similar, if not the same, wildlife? Now, the bullet itself, who knows how long it dates back to, but still, it's just interesting. I mean, what would be another possibility? I know some have been talking about mine shafts, mining in the area. You come across a prospect mine, you come across a mine shaft or some, it might not belong to you, belongs to somebody else, and you can have conflict and wars over mines and resources which could be within it of value. Now, if there ever was a dispute in the past, whether it's before Kenny's time or not, there could have been a warning shot fired if someone got too close to the mine shaft, if there was a bit of a dispute going on and a shell casing was ejected from somewhere. Nevertheless, the fact that there are the use of firearms out there is interesting. When you look at the Dillon Rounds case, loose in Utah, the desert, as vast and desolate as that is, and there's not many people that live in the area, there's at least some people that live in the area. There's an actual highway which runs through the area a bit further north and then upwards to Idaho. And just the general theme of people coming and going and passing on by, driving down the back roads, crossing over from Nevada to Utah and Utah to Nevada, and hunting within the area, and it vastly being known for firearms, shooting random stuff and animals, and sometimes firing at one another. Crazy stuff going on over there and across to Montello. That, okay, you kind of expect that, there's activity, but when it's in such a desolate area, a gunshot fired in a desolate area will be heard much more louder than in a more populated place. And that can be meant as a symbolism and also, to some extent, reality. Because a busy place, to some extent, of course, can be drowned out by external noise. But in a quiet location, as open as it is, the noise can travel some distance. So, you let me know what you think, because I know Jeff Clark suggested either mine shaft, scent ending, and being taken away by the sky, the air. If there was a helicopter, a plane, some drone, or if it descended, landed, if people got out or not, apprehended Kenny Veach and took him elsewhere. The same could happen if he was incapacitated by a bullet shot and then taken away by air, most likely. You can't really get a vehicle down there. It just wouldn't be practical. And because Jay, Chuck and others have already seen military activity flying on over, and we've seen it on satellite imagery too, it's always a possibility. Now, just to measure the distance, we might as well acknowledge it whilst we're here. So, this is going to be a rough one. Take that into consideration, as usual. I might have done it already, to be fair, but there's no harm in trying it again. Rough hike in regard to SB, going up to that rock cairn, could be about 1.88 miles, round up to about, at the most, 2 miles maybe, 1.88 or so miles, and that's just one way. Would a person truly cover 1.88 miles on foot? I mean, yeah, it's definitely possible, but even that short-ish distance, because of the terrain, the quality, the temperatures, it can still leave you exhausted and fatigued, especially if you're not used to doing it, and it's just a dangerous area in general, and if you do stumble across wildlife along the way. And, you know, just because it's kind of difficult, if anyone was to really go out there, they've got to have a good enough reason or a strong enough motive for them to get out there in the first place. If you don't know what you're doing out there, or you kind of like, not in the mid, I don't think you would bother. But someone who's on a mission, if they were assigned to take Kenny out, to cause harm, to scare him off, I mean, there's that. I mean, the only other thing that could be acknowledged, and I'll just get rid of this for a second, if it'll allow me. If Kenny Veach did get so far to the mine shaft, did he manually take the coins and the phone out? That's the only issue at this moment. If a warning shot was fired, which I just don't think would be the case as in a warning shot, but if somehow it was, or Kenny was approached and told not to come back, and he ran away or was told to leave the area. It could explain why he double backed on himself and why descent ended at the mineshaft and strengthened when coming back to his vehicle. But then to just simply drive up and leave, I just don't think he would follow through with that and keep quiet. I think if he was to keep quiet, he would have no choice and be forced to by the presence, some kind of intervention. But I'm just basing it off the alignment, how you got the mineshaft, a possible area where Kenny was at, and if not, just walking by. And if there's no obstruction with a bullet casing being up there, and the shot was fired down this way, as in them facing west, it could link to Kenny. Hopefully you found this video somewhat interesting. Be sure to hit the thumbs up, like button, share the video so more awareness can be spread. And if you're on mobile device, down below where the comment section is, if you swipe across, there should be the hype button. Feel free to interact with the hype button. It'll just help with pushing the video out there so more people get to learn. With credit to SB Vegas for the hikes that he has done, the material that he provides, and the findings along the way. And whilst SB does have a sharp eye for picking up on stuff, I mean, there are times where I can go a bit deeper or at least make links, comparisons to previous findings. I do think it's interesting, just the fact that Kenny has come across a rock cairn, SB has, Scott Natal, J Chuck, whether they'll all be done at the same time or by the same people, this one particular rock cairn with the bullet casing does stand out from the rest. And because the canyon being open and getting a good clear view back that way, where you came up from, where Kenny Veach would be passing on by, it's like in the line of sight for most part of it. Maybe you agree with that theory or part of it, maybe you don't, but be sure to let me know down below in the comments section. With that being said, we'll leave it there for now, but there are some other interesting findings along the way and other videos I'll need to do shortly. I might consider a live stream tomorrow. We'll just see how things go. That's it for now. Thanks for watching. Goodbye and good night.